Hi, I'm Megan Galloway. Welcome back to Changed. This is the podcast where we talk about big moments that change us and how we can navigate through those moments. And today I am here in my hometown of Kansas City with the absolutely incredible Mary Messner. Mary, welcome.
Thank you. I'm excited to be here.
It's going to be so fun. And Mary is such an incredible human. I've just genuinely so enjoyed getting to know you over the last several years. And Mary is a keynote speaker based here out of Kansas City as well. She does incredible keynotes all about creativity. She has a TEDx that's recently released but already has amassed more than 10,000 views, which is amazing. And I think one of the most incredible things about Mary is she so seamlessly and gracefully, I think, has grown in your career, both as a human being, but also you're a mom of two young girls. And I'm just super excited to hear your perspectives and opinions today. Thank you so much for coming on.
I'm thrilled. Excited to be here. Thanks for having me.
Yeah. So first, just tell us a little bit about your background. And I think one of the big questions I have for you is your brand and your keynote is all about getting creative. Mm-hmm. What does creativity mean to you, and how have you come upon this definition?
Yeah, so I'll start with the definition. And I'll say that I always tell people that creativity is the courage to keep going in a new and different way. So I think that blending that acknowledgement of courage directly into creativity is just massively important. And the reason for that is creativity feels for many people like it's something that they are not privy to, or that it's not for them. So a lot of times from the stage, I'll say, how many of you think that you are creative? And about half of the room will put their hands up and the other half won't. And usually it's because, one, they'll say, I'm just not creative. Like, I can't draw, I can't sing, I can't paint. So we'll come back to that. That's one group. The other one might say, I like creativity, but it's not something that I want to step into on a regular basis. Like, I like where I'm at, things are comfortable, don't move my cheese, let's just keep the status quo. And then the other two are the people that understand it, either the messy creativity, which is the world I live in, which means lots of sticky notes and voice memos to myself, things that don't always turn into action, but like my mind is always going. And then there's this magic group of people that can have the big ideas and can beautifully execute them. But for those first two categories who don't connect deeply with creativity, I do think it's because we are defining it as the product, like a creative product that we can touch or feel or hear or see, as opposed to the existence of creativity just in our everyday world. So the way that we solve problems, the way that we come up with new ideas for our personal lives, for our business lives, and to be able to embrace creativity in that way, I think that's a courageous act. To say, I'm gonna think about things differently. I'm going to take a chance here. I'm going to try something new and different and accept that it might succeed and it might fail. And both of those are okay because I took that courageous creative leap to put myself out there and give it a shot.
Yeah, it almost feels more risky the way that you're talking about this creativity, because that's so much of like the people that we think of like traditional creative. They think outside the box. They're doing things that are considered riskier.
Yeah.
How have you come upon this definition? Like, what is it in your career that's led you to this place where you're like, man, I just wish more people would think about creativity in a different way? Yeah,
it's interesting because I did not realize that this was how I operated. I kind of had to do some self-reflection on what it was that allowed me to go after the things I wanted to go after, and also not be worried about the failure that could happen, because that's always going to end up being, a risk when you're doing something that's new and different. I did work with a coach who helped me do a lot of self-reflection. This experience in and of itself was a creative experience. We got very woo-woo, I'll say, like lots of meditation. There was sound therapy, things that I just don't go after in my normal everyday world. But it gave me this gift of thinking and reflecting and asking myself questions about what is it that I do that allows me to accomplish what I want to accomplish, or at least try what I want to accomplish. And the answer it became really glaring, that it is this willingness to embrace the courage that it takes to keep going in a new and different way. And that again, that in and of itself is a creative endeavor. And so it was self-reflection, Megan, a lot of quiet self-reflection to get me to that point.
That's beautiful. And I think one of the things that I really like that you talk about too is the idea that you tried things that maybe wouldn't be what you would normally go for, but you trusted someone else to introduce them to you and experiment with something that maybe you're not initially attracted to. Like, a sound meditation or like those things are things that not everybody listening may immediately gravitate towards either. But it's more about like the idea of just trying and experimenting with new ways of being until you find what you need in that particular stage, it sounds like.
Yeah,
okay.
You got it.
Cool.
Absolutely.
That's amazing. Okay, so the podcast is all about how we change. And the big question that I ask all of the guests is, what is the one moment that's changed you most as a human being?
Yeah, becoming a mom. I mean, that's my absolute specific, clear answer for me. The part that has changed me the most is becoming a mom. And before I go any further, I want to just be very clear for anyone that's listening. Becoming a mother or not becoming a mother or choosing to have children or the journey that someone's on to have children, that is a deeply personal experience. So when I talk about my experience of becoming a mom, it is just my experience. And I want to be very careful to make sure that no one interprets that as any type of a roadmap for what it looks like to become a mom or not become a mom or go down that whole path of parenthood. And I'm clear about that because one of the things that I think that this is the kind of antithesis to creativity is this idea of conformity, of assuming that there is one way we're supposed to operate and one path that we're supposed to go down. And especially with motherhood, it becomes a really, really slippery slope. So I'm just putting it out there as the disclaimer in big, bold letters. This is my unique experience, and everyone is entitled to their own on that whole journey.
Thank you so much for saying that, because I think that especially with the prevalence of social media now, it feels as though we're supposed, as mothers or as not, like as human beings, supposed to fit in some specific molds now because there's so much information out there about how to do things in the right ways, whether it's parenting or something else. But I think with your example here in particular, as a fellow mom, I think that's one of the hardest parts for me right now about being a mom in our day-to-day is the information overload and also like the influence of seeing the way that other people parent, but in large volumes that make me feel like I have no idea what I'm doing because everybody else has it figured out, but I don't, right? Like there's that really real feeling that I think occurs for a lot of people.
Yeah, and none of us have any clue what we're doing.
No, isn't that so true?
That's the reality of it, is none of us have done this before. And let's say you have 7 children and you're like, yeah, I'm a pro, I've done this a million times. Every one of those children is different. And so no, you still have no idea what you're doing, which is, I kind of feel like maybe there's a gift in that this is one of those unique experiences in life that absolutely does not have any type of a playbook that you get to figure out every single day as you're learning yourself, as you're learning who your children are, because they're evolving every single day. It is the wildest ride I've ever been on.
I want to come back to that in a little bit, like your kids evolving and like learning new I want to come back to that in a little bit. But before I do, I want to just hear a little bit more. And for anybody that's listening to this that maybe doesn't know about you yet, tell us about your life and like your career up until the point where you became a mom.
Sure. So my background is in healthcare. My degree is health information management, which basically means the business side of medicine. I worked at a hospital here in Kansas City, Research Medical Center. I was their health information management director. It's a mouthful. And then left and went over to a company called Cerner Corporation, which a few years ago was acquired by Oracle. So there's that healthcare winding road. And that landing at Cerner, I thought it would be my forever. I was a lifer. All in, drinking the Kool-Aid. It was a really fun company to feel like I could grow up inside of. And I set my sights on as much career growth as I could imagine. And glass ceiling be damned, like going all the way. So when I was pregnant with my oldest daughter, she's now 11, I was 33 at the time. So I was quote unquote an older mom with my first. And my husband and I would talk about this. We'd say, I'm going to keep working. I absolutely was determined that I was going to keep working throughout. We were going to make sure that we had her in a daycare we were comfortable with. We found a daycare on the Cerner campus. So it was a company-run daycare. She was right across the street from me. I was going to keep traveling. We were going to get the nanny. I had it all completely figured out. And then she was born. And it completely changed. Everything. And not just, it wasn't just about changing what my career goals were. I felt like I was just figuring out who I was all over again. What were my priorities? How did I want to spend my time? What brought me joy? That was completely different. And I remember it was 10 weeks into maternity leave, and I called my HR department and I said, what do I have to do? I need more time here. I can't go taking her in today. I'm just not ready. And they said, there's nothing you can do. So 12 weeks, I went back to work, and I remember dropping her off at daycare in the mornings, and I would sit in my car and I would cry. Again, like going across the street. I would drop her off and then drive 500 feet to my office door. It was not a far distance. But I would just sit there and cry. And I walked into the office, and so many people in the office were just wonderfully compassionate. And there were a couple things, and I say this, I'll tell a couple little lessons for me in case anyone is listening who's navigating this in the same way. The first thing that I had a woman tell me, she said, my best advice I can give you is lower your bar. You're so used to performing at a certain level, and so you're going to really have a hard time walking this tightrope of saying, I now have this other being that I'm caring for, and I still want to perform at a certain level. And she said, just give yourself permission to lower that bar. It's okay. There's something else that allows you or that needs you to put some effort into. So that was incredibly helpful. The second thing is I was a mom who was breastfeeding, and that was a whole experience in and of itself. And so the number one thing I always say to people is, if you choose to go down that path of nursing and you're pumping, then there is, in that moment, nothing more important than making sure that you are feeding your child. So step out of the meeting. It will continue without you, and go do what you need to do in that moment. I had a lot of guilt around that, and that's a mind game too. So I say that with a lot of sincerity for a lot of women. So this went on for a long time, this crying in the car situation. And I finally said to my husband, I think it's time. I don't think I can keep doing this. I think I need to quit my job. And I remember sitting in a meeting room I was an executive at the time. I had a team of several hundred. I was managing people that were across the world. And I sat in this room and I looked around and thought, there is, $1 million worth of salary here in this room, not making effective decisions, talking about what we could or should or would do if we had the time or the resources. And I thought, I'm choosing to be here versus there with her. And that was all I needed to know. That was the night that I said, I'm making this happen. It's no longer, I think I need to quit my job. It was, I know I need to quit my job. So for many women, this is the time where they say, I need to lean in because my job gives me the relief that I need so then I can be the best mother that I can be at home. And I think that is a beautiful decision to make. For me, it never felt like the right decision. So I did. I quit. I went into my boss's office and I said, here's what needs to happen. And he responded by saying, would you consider staying part-time? And I thought, well, I didn't even know that was an option. And he said, I would love to make this work. Would you stay part-time? And I said, well, I mean, I can always quit again. So yes, let's give it a shot. So I did that for years. I was part-time for years. My second daughter was born, and thank God I was part-time because the days that were home were the hardest days of my life. That I did not realize how hard being a stay-at-home mom actually is. And I did that for several years, and then I ended up coming back full-time. But what I think is really interesting, and this is why I go back to that big bold print disclaimer from earlier, is that even as I was going down this path of leaning into what I felt like was the right decision for me, I also never felt fully settled. I saw, just like we see on social media now, I saw the moms that were doing the library story time and taking their kids to art classes and playing with their children. I don't like to play with my children. I love my children. I don't like to just sit down and play. And so I never felt like I had my crew there. And then I'd see the moms that were taking their children to daycare, and they were using their brains every single day and making big decisions. And part of me still craved that life. And then there was this other half where I felt like I was just me and my kids, and we'd run errands together, and I felt like I had my little buddies that were palling around with me. But every one of those places felt great and ostracizing all at the same time. And I say all of that, you go back to the question of what changed you the most. It was those little moments that reminded me that we're always seeking, we're always discovering, we're always exploring, we're always looking for new ways to navigate life and try new things, and that we get the gift of exploring what that looks like for each of us as individuals. Not what it looks like for the different people that appear to have it all figured out, but for us and who we are.
I think one of the things that you're talking about that's really important that I think a lot of people experience, but we maybe don't talk about very much, is that feeling that you're describing of like the in-between, where, like you said, you knew you were making the right decision, but the right decision felt hard, and you didn't quite feel like you belonged like anywhere, yet you knew you belonged with your daughter during that in that part-time capacity. I mean, I think that happens to a lot of us as we go through life transitions overall, where or even, like, I feel that way sometimes, you know, when we go through life changes and then our friendships change.
Yes.
Or our relationship with our family changes, or our relationship with work changes. And all of a sudden, those people or things mean different things than they did to us before, but we don't know what they are yet. What advice would you have for somebody that's feeling like that right now? That whether it's like in the process of parenting, or, you know, they're in a different stage of life where something feels right but unsettled, and they feel that limbo in between feeling.
Yeah.
What do you do?
You know, I don't think we navigate it alone. So I'll create balance against what I said earlier, that for each of us, it's an individual journey and it's an individual experience. And I think if we can acknowledge that our experience is unique, we can stop seeking the perfect path from someone else, from watching people on social media or by just observing what other people that you know are doing. But I do think the way that we can navigate this together is by allowing a sense of openness. So there's a phrase that I love to use, and I'll share it here too, and it's simply help me think through this. And the reason why I use that phrase to the point where my husband rolls his eyes at me with the frequency, but it is not asking someone else to solve something for you. It's not asking someone else to tell you what to do or give you the answer or the 5-step plan to becoming a woman who succeeds in motherhood, because none of that stuff exists. if you turn to someone and just say, here's what's true for me right now, and I know there's other things that are true for you right now, but what's true for me is this. Will you help me think through this? All you're doing is inviting conversation. You're asking for someone's thoughts and ideas. You're not asking for an answer. You're not asking for a solution. You're just inviting conversation. And I think in my experience anyway, that has opened the doors to different possibilities. It's allowed me to look at my own experience in a new light, to find my own answers to what the best next steps are. And so that's what I would say. Lean into the people around you, not for answers or for how to do things, but just as an invitation to help you think through things.
Yeah, because I do believe like going through those types of periods when you have those feelings of not belonging or feeling stuck or in between or however you want to describe that feeling where like an old identity you have is breaking, yet you've not yet found this new one that feels like wholly you. It's lonely to be in that space, because I think when you don't feel like you belong to yourself, it's hard to feel like you belong to anybody else.
Yes.
Well, I think that one of the best ways to find ourselves again is through the lenses of the people around us. Not necessarily that they need to tell us exactly who we need to become, to your point, but to help us process through that, to, I think, reassure us of the parts of us that aren't changing, of who we are that's like still grounded and real and true. Because I think especially when we're going through hard, big transitions in life, it's really easy to feel like nothing is going right and everything is untethered. And a lot of times there's a lot of stuff that's still as it's always been. We just, I don't know, we forget that when we're going through the depths of the intensity of going through these big life transitions.
Well, and I think there's a vulnerability in what you just described. Like it's lonely, it feels vulnerable, it feels scary. Again, it feels like everybody else has it figured out. But when you do open the door to those conversations, nobody else does have it figured out. It's what we said earlier, that it is, you could do, if we look at the example of motherhood, or if you look at the example of entrepreneurship, there are no two paths that are the exact same, and they shouldn't be. Otherwise, you're just recreating something that's already out there. But the more that you are able to lean into that vulnerability, and again, say, here's what's true for me right now, I think you'll find that's pretty true for a lot of people in their own way. And you now get to create this almost reciprocal support system that helps you think through whatever you're going through. They can help you think through whatever they're going through. I think the result of that level of vulnerability is always a strengthening across the board.
Yeah, and honestly, that's something I found with you, Marian, like in my entrepreneurship journey. There's been many times where you and I have sat down in a coffee shop and said like, okay, here's what we're thinking about this, and I maybe have this part figured out, I want to share it, or I have no idea here. Will you help me think through this? And I think that it does take a lot of vulnerability to admit that you don't know. Yeah. And also a lot of trust in the other person to say, like, I see you and I want to open up for your help.
Yes.
And I think it is a trust building, like it builds friendships, you know, and relationships with people when we're able to do this. But I don't think it's what's common for most people, like when we're feeling this way, to be like, you know what I really need is I need a heart-to-heart with somebody. That's going to make me feel great, you know?
Well, it's so interesting. And you and I can relate to this deeply, because as solopreneurs, as business owners, we have a persona that we put out into the world so that the people who want to hire us are like, man, those gals, they got it figured out.
They're so confident.
We need them on board. Yes, but the unintended consequence of that is that other people who are also solopreneurs and want to do their own thing, and that hopefully we're inspiring to do their own thing, are also potentially having their own self-doubt by saying, Megan's out there, she's doing this podcast thing, she's got it all figured out, Mary's on those stages, and oh my gosh, I could never do that. And then we have a conversation like this, and we record it, and we share it, and it gives a little bit of insight to people to say, actually, every day is a new adventure. And every day we're screwing something up. And every day we're finding a new path forward. And every day we're finding a little bit of success. And that's the normal course. What you sometimes see out there is not, yes, there's normalcy there, but it's not without all these other layers that come alongside it.
Yeah, the insecurities, the not knowing, the vulnerability, like all of those things are part of the experience, and you just can't get stuck in them.
Yes.
And but that's, I think, like the more entrepreneurs that I've met, that's like, I feel like pretty confident that that's the biggest differentiator for the people that are the most successful, are just the ones that say, yeah, I'm not getting it right, but I'm just going to keep trying different things to see what sticks.
Yeah.
And so they just default to action.
So that ties right back into that definition of creativity, and why I launched into that is a courageous thing to just keep going. And so the transparency behind that, I applaud you for creating a space like this for someone like me to come in and talk about it, and your other guests to come in and talk about it, because it's normalizing something that people don't talk about enough.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for saying that.
Yeah.
Okay, so I want to go back to something that you said a little bit earlier on when you were talking about, your changed moment. And you said something to the effect of like, and as you're parenting your kids, you also have to figure out who they are anew every day because they're also changing. And I think that that's like one of the things that's most fascinating about our relationships with people on this earth. Like whether it is you as a child with your parent, whether it's you with your spouse, whether it's you as a parent to your child, whether it's you with your friends who you change with, or a boss that you have that's changed a lot over 10 years that you work together, is that I feel like so many times our brains are wired to like put people into a box of here's who they are as human beings, and then we never take them out of that box, and yet they grow out of that persona. How do you think about this?
Yeah, it's funny you say that. So if I were to say, pick like your, I don't know, were you in a sorority?
Yes.
Okay, so a sorority sister that you were close with at your sorority, but you don't really talk as much anymore. If you were to picture her in your mind, I bet she still lives in the sorority house. And she's at least living in the town where you went to college. And I think you're right. We turn off, if we lose touch with someone or something evolves, we are always latching on to that place where we felt like we knew that person the best. And in our mind, that's where they always stay. And when you look at someone like your children or your spouse or people that you spend all of this time with, you don't get the luxury to leave them in that one little spot. And so I don't know that I have an answer for this, except I will say I have a lot of friends, I go back to the motherhood thing, that really say, oh, the baby phase, and I miss it, and look how cute and how cuddly they were. Let me just say, I'm not a baby person.
That's okay, me either.
Like, I don't get it. You're not a baby person, and you don't like playing with your kids, and yet, so yes, it can all be true, my own personal motherhood journey. But the baby phase for me was just really exhausting and a lot of work. But what I do love is every new phase with them is different. And every new phase with them, I'm learning something more about them. I have my oldest who's starting middle school next year, and my youngest who is 9. And I'm watching the influences of the world shape who they are. And even just their internal processing of things start to shape who they are. And on one hand, it's scary, and it puts me into that space again of not having a clue what I'm doing. And on the other hand, I see myself reflected in them. I see acknowledgement that I'm changing, and so are they, and we're learning together. We're both growing up. I mean, I'm 44, and I can say I'm growing up alongside my children still. So I don't know that I have an answer for it, except to say I love watching it happen, and then seeing it myself as I watch it in them. I don't know. It's pretty cool.
Yeah, that's magical. And I think that's one of the things, like, I'm an executive coach. I work with a lot of different executive teams. And I think that's one of the things that I'm frequently having to like remind myself is I need to meet like my kids where they're at or the people around me. And I don't always know how far they've gone in their journeys with whatever it is. Mm-hmm. And so it just like is a constant reminder to me to get curious about where people are at.
Yeah.
Which is hard.
Yes. Well, and I think that snippet of time, I love this interweaving of parenthood and raising children and the business side that comes in. It's fun to kind of hear this bounce back and forth because you're with your kids for a certain period of the day. You're with someone you're coaching for a minuscule amount of time with them. And then they go back to the rest of the influences of the world. And that is constantly shaping who they are. And so if you put too much onus on your ability to impact them in that tiny amount of time without acknowledging that there's so much else happening, I think you're doing everyone a disservice. But when you can create that wrapper to say, here's what I see in you, what do all these other people around you see? And what do you see in the world or all around you? It's kind of a fun little, it's like a little package that you get to just put together and you get to be one little part of it.
That's beautiful. I love that. Okay, so one last question around this, and then we're going to move into the speed round.
Yeah.
So when you think about how this moment has changed your path to be who you are today, mm-hmm. what do you think is the biggest way this moment has changed you as who you are sitting in this chair?
It has showed me that there is not a single path. Mm-hmm. That's the biggest thing. I assumed it was career, kids are hanging out here, you got, the spouse and you got life experiences, but like, ooh, you are your career. And for a long time I had massive amounts of satisfaction because I love being able to use my brain in different ways and my work was my outlet for that. And then it opened my eyes, I guess, to all these different ways that you could do life. And so, my trajectory continued to where I did go back to work full time back at Cerner for a few years, and then ultimately took a chance on myself and went out on my own. And let me be clear again, I had no idea. I left to go be a keynote speaker. And if someone's like, well, how do you do that? I don't know. You go out there and you update your LinkedIn and say keynote speaker. And I'm joking a bit because I did a lot of training and invested in myself to get to that point. But it wasn't like this specific roadmap to say, here's how I got my first gig. It was leaning into my network and it was asking people to help me think through this. And I do think that's the power of when something does change you and everything turns out okay afterwards, you start saying, creating space for the changes. There's a lot of different roads you can travel down, and that's pretty cool to think about.
And you're still learning. And
yes.
Like the paradoxical tug of both of those things together that you embrace so wholly is beautiful. You do a nice job of that.
Thank you.
I would love to do a speed round with you.
Right.
So first question is, what is one thing that you used to hate, but now you love it? Or it could be the opposite way. Maybe you used to love it, now you hate it.
Well, I'll say public speaking, which is...
What?
I know. So how much speed do I have to put into these answers? I'll do my best here. When I was in college, I had a speech class, as many of us take. And first, when I used to speak, my mom would joke that I would call our house if I had to get a hold of my parents, and this was before cell phones, and I would leave a message on the answering machine, like we had back in the days where you'd press the button and, someone would share their recording. And my mom used to joke that she would say, you leave voice messages and I have no idea what you said because you talk so quickly. And so I would get up in speech class and I would be terrified, like pee my pants nervous kind of a thing, if you know what I'm talking about. And I'd get up there and a 5-minute speech that I'd practiced would be a 60-second speech, and then I would run off stage terrified. Absolutely hated it. And then the thing that changed for me in that is I went from having to give a speech that was assigned by someone else into my first professional world where I had to start speaking on some, healthcare related topics to teams of physicians and clinicians. And it was stuff that I knew about and I was an expert on, and I saw the value in sharing with an audience, and suddenly I understood the point of public speaking, and it became something that I could lean into more so. But yeah, I hated it.
I think that's so funny that now you've ended up in this space,
Yeah.
this pathway, and you're so brilliant at what you do now.
Thank you.
Oh my goodness. Okay, and then is there a book or a movie that has totally changed you?
Long ago, I read a book called, it was The Fountainhead by Ayn Rand. So well-known book, and lots of lessons that live inside that book. But for me, the biggest thing that I took away from that is the whole story is centered around a person who, it's about a newspaper, the evolution of a newspaper. And this guy started working for the company as the newspaper delivery boy. And then he went on to be the CEO of the company. And it was this really interesting, and I'm simplifying this book big time, but it was this really interesting lesson on how you could grow and evolve your career with experience, with hard work, with trying new things, with being open to change. And for me, it solidified that was something I desired from a career. I wanted growth, I wanted challenge, I wanted mental intrigue, I wanted to have the ability to try new things, to see where they would take me. And it was the first time that I could read a book, and I think I was 19 or 20 when I read this, but it was the first time that I read something and it created such clarity to say that professionally is what I am seeking.
Thank you for sharing that. I would love to hear a little bit more. The last thing in our speed round.
Yeah.
You just did a TED Talk.
Yeah.
It's amazing.
Yeah.
What do you want to share with the people that are listening about your TED Talk?
Yeah, so the TEDx came live at the end of October, and a lot of people ask about it. They'll say, how did you get it? And that was really just through my network, which was incredible. I feel very lucky the way that it all came together. But I think the part that's really important for everyone to understand is, and this applies not just to a TED Talk, this is just anytime you put yourself out there publicly, is this vulnerability that comes alongside it. And we talked about vulnerability a little bit earlier too. And I had to muddy my way through that to say, I just created something that I feel really proud of, and it's going to go on the internet, and it's going to live there forever, and people are going to watch it, and they're going to form opinions about it. And so I spent a lot of time thinking about that emotional state and some of the fear that came along with that. And here's what it came down to for me. I think we can stop ourselves from doing things with the fear of saying, what if someone hates it? And someone will hate it. And that's not a self-deprecating statement. Someone will hate it. There's actually a lot of freedom in that, because if that is true, then the opposite is also true. It's not what if someone loves it, it is someone will love it. And that, I go back to creativity being the courage to keep going in a new and different way. For me to acknowledge that someone will always disagree with what you're doing and think that what you're doing is wrong, or how you're acting or behaving or wearing or believing, any of those things, there will be someone that will disagree with it. But for that to be true, you also have to acknowledge that there is someone who will love what you are doing and stand beside you and cheer for you and go all in for you, because that's who we get to be as humans. We get to live across that full spectrum, and that gave me a massive amount of courage.
It's like the definition of living in abundance instead of your fear.
Yes.
That's wonderful. Well, thank you so much, Mary, for
Yeah.
joining me today.
Thanks for
this has
having
been
me.
absolutely lovely. And full transparency in the especially when we're talking about like failing and moving forward. This is actually our re-record of this, because the first time it stopped recording after 5 minutes, and we didn't realize until we were already done recording. And you know what? It was my first time using all of the new gear.
Yeah.
And I'm so glad that we did it. And this was an even better conversation having gone through it again. So thank you so much, Mary.
Absolutely.
Where is the best place to get in touch?
Honestly, LinkedIn. I live and breathe on LinkedIn. So easy place to find me there. My website's marymessner.com. I have a book that's going to be coming out, should be this fall. So that is very exciting. So stay tuned for that. And those are the spots.
Congrats, Mary.
Thank you so much.
Thank you all so much for being here today. We so appreciate you being here on Changed. I'm really hoping that you took something away in these moments of big transitions for you deciding how you want to journey through, especially if you're in a period of an in-between where it feels really hard, but there is something waiting on the other side. And as Mary says, a lot of times it just takes that courageous next step into the unknown for you to discover what's really possible on the other side. Thank you for being here. Thank you so much for joining me today on Changed. I hope this story sparks something in you, maybe a reminder of your own growth or a new perspective on where you're headed. Remember, change doesn't have to be something that you're scared of. It's an opportunity to become more of who we're meant to be. If you enjoyed this episode, please subscribe, share, and leave a review. Your story is unfolding and we can't wait to see where it takes you. Until next time.